Hello, we're live.
Hello there.
Happy
Good
Saturday.
morning. Good morning on the East Coast. Anyway, if you're joining us from the east side of the country.
I mean, it's morning.
Oh, it's morning
Yeah,
everywhere. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
true. Good
afternoon
morning.
anymore. Yeah, we're early today.
That's true. Yeah, I'm getting crossed up here with our
Unless
normal
you're
routine.
unless you're listening across the pond.
Right, right.
So, oh boy. Yeah. So I know. Radio Rebellion. What's up? Good morning. Good morning. I'm picking up a new puppy today at 1:00, so I had to. I know this early morning worked out for me today. So that will be the rest of my day, taking care of a new puppy.
I'm actually going to be in the afternoon, early afternoon. I'm trying to get my pole right. Still a bit cloudy. It's not green anymore, but it's cloudy, so I got to figure that out. And then we're gonna go on a hike out at
Oh, that's
Hell's
cool.
Hollow. Yeah. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Good morning, Peter. How you doing? Thanks for joining.
Yes. Good morning, guys. Thank you for being with us.
I have not been in. So for everyone out there live, Hell's Hollow is kind of like it's a state. It's part of a state park, right?
Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
so.
So it's a kind of a wooded area with creeks and all that stuff. Ominous name, but very beautiful place.
Yeah, it is kind of an ominous name, I guess.
Hell's Hollow. Cool. Well, I think I'm ready to start. Whenever you're
Sounds
ready.
good to me. Yeah, let's get it started.
Make sure I got my soundboard all ready. I'm going to let it run because I just hit record, so I'm going to let it run for just a little bit. Make sure we're not getting cut off at the beginning like we usually do. I haven't had that happen in a few weeks, and I think it's because I'm not streaming to Facebook and YouTube at the same time.
Yeah, that's probably helping.
Yeah. So I don't miss Facebook streaming.
No.
It didn't help, and it only created more issues, I think, because I was actually having some connection issues with YouTube as well. It would start to buffer a lot, so I think it was because I was doing
good
both.
riddance, Facebook.
Yeah. All right, I think I'm ready to hit the intro. You ready?
Okay. Yep.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Hello there. This is the From a Certain Point of View podcast, and it is episode 30. Big 3-0. I turned 30 4 years ago.
Okay.
I'm Josh.
I'm Adam. That's a coincidence, I guess.
Yeah. It's not really. I just figured I'd throw it out there. So yeah, 30 episodes, Adam. Man, did you think we'd get to 30?
You want me to be honest?
Yeah.
I didn't think we would.
I didn't think we would either. We got some staying power though here. We're still going strong. Even after the 9th film in the Skywalker saga has come and gone, we're still here.
And we even had an episode about Last Jedi, and we made it through that one.
We did, yeah. If we could make it through that, we could probably make
that
it
was
through
episode.
anything.
That was episode 2. We got 28 episodes after that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So, what have you been up to this week when it comes to Star Wars?
I watched Empire Strikes Back twice, both with audio commentary, 2 different audio commentary tracks. And reading more of Alphabet Squadron, loving it still, and gonna finish that up this week for the book club. Very excited to finish that one up. And that's honestly probably about it.
Nice.
How about you? Oh, I watched Disney Gallery yesterday, of course.
Yeah.
So
same here. So the Disney Gallery, which I'm very excited to talk about this one because I love all the technology stuff.
This was the episode I was waiting for.
Yeah, for sure. So I checked that out, and then I this week finished season 1 of Rebels, which I'm just loving more and more. And it's my second time through. The first time, I watched it when it came out, but
Yeah.
revisiting it now, and I'm thinking about maybe doing something on the blog about Rebels Revisited, or
That's a
a
good idea.
canon catch up for Rebels, or
Yeah.
doing it season by season. So maybe be looking out for that. I think I might do that. So
That's good because
yeah,
I caught up with my canon catch up stuff, and I don't have anything for this week. So,
right.
no
So
pressure.
we also, yeah, no. We also had a poll this week, and it was a
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah, we got a lot of
Um,
response on that.
Yeah, we had a record high for us of 147 votes on this poll. So thank you if you participated in that, voted in that poll. The question was, in which Star Wars film did Mark Hamill give his best performance as Luke Skywalker? And when this poll started, I was like, oh boy, I think The Last Jedi's got it.
I
It was
didn't know. I didn't look until last night, and I was like,
right.
I was like, am I looking at this right?
The Last Jedi was in the lead for a long time, and
Yeah.
that's it was for me. It was difficult to choose
It
between
was
The
hard.
Last
I actually took
and Return of the Jedi.
yeah. I
Yeah.
actually took probably 2 or 3 days to think this one over before I even
Yeah.
responded.
Yeah, it was a tough one. What
It
did you
was.
end up going with?
I actually ended up going with Return of the Jedi, and this is my reasoning for it. It's always been my favorite Star Wars movie. I've always loved seeing Luke as a Jedi, acting
Yeah.
like a Jedi, doing all the Jedi stuff. The Last Jedi, I mean, I can't fault his performance at all, and it's not like
Right.
it's so.
It was a great
I think
performance, but you just struggled
Yeah.
with like the character decisions and stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I tried to even separate that from it. I tried to even just look at Mark's performance, period, and
Yeah.
see where that took me. And I think a lot of it has to do with Return of the Jedi just being my favorite Star Wars movie, and so I just love him in that movie so much, I guess.
Yeah.
But and you know my feelings about The Last Jedi, and I was really debating on just hitting that button, just saying that's his best, but something about it just made me go with Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And I think it's just probably because my my feelings about the movie overall being that being my favorite of the Star Wars movies. So
I think that makes a lot of sense. I was really close to picking Return of the Jedi for this one,
yeah.
but I still haven't revealed our results yet. So I guess I'm building up this suspense here. But our final tally, The Empire Strikes Back came in at 29% of the vote. The Last Jedi, 28% of the vote. The Rise of Skywalker, 0% of the vote. And the winning answer was Return of the Jedi at 43%. So this poll took quite a turn,
Yeah.
during its 3-day run.
It really did.
Yeah. So the people have
Last
spoken.
Jedi didn't even get second place.
No, yeah. Empire ended up edging it out.
I was
So,
really surprised by that. Like at first, I was
interesting.
surprised that The Last Jedi didn't win, and then I looked at it closer, and I'm like, "Geez, it didn't even get second." So
Yeah. So
and the thing I was thinking about last night after I watched this, like, there's no wrong answers to that poll,
no, it's very much an opinion.
except I guess Rise of Skywalker because it got zero. I guess that would have been a wrong answer.
Right. Right.
And there's, like I said, there's no wrong answer to that. I know that there's probably a lot of baggage with that question.
Certainly.
And The Last Jedi is a hands down amazing performance by Mark Hamill, and I can't fault anyone that picks that because I mean it's up there. Not even just in Star Wars for him, in his career overall, it's up there for him.
Yeah, and we talked about last week about how it was even more impressive that he didn't agree with the role he was given in that film, and he still just gave an excellent performance, which is impressive, most impressive. And I think Rian Johnson, despite what you might think about the decisions he made, I think one of his great abilities as a director is being able to pull out great performances from the actors. I mean, I think when I look at The Last Jedi, from the from the cast, I see some of the best acting performances in that film, and I think that's one of Ryan's strengths is pulling out those performances. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can see from chat you can add one more vote for TLJ. I'm not sure if that.
There we
I'm
go.
not sure
Maybe
if
maybe
that.
that might give it the tie with Empire. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah. So the rest of this week's we already talked about Disney Gallery. We're gonna be talking about that. That's second up. First up though is news. We have some Star Wars news to talk about. And then we're going to be looking back on The Empire Strikes Back that just celebrated its 40th anniversary on Thursday. So,
Yes, we have a very exciting show ahead.
yeah, and I want to say hi to everyone in chat. So far, we have Radio Rebellion, Peter Viox, Rural Farm Boy. I've been doing so good at that one for the last like 5 weeks, and I stumbled on it today. And Pizza and Parsecs. So welcome everyone. We're glad to
Nice.
have you all here, and you ready to start episode 30?
Yeah, let's get into our news segment for this week.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
Okay, so first up, we are talking more about Mark Hamill, and we know that Mark Hamill had very strong opinions about the I guess characterization of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, but he also had some opinions back in the original trilogy days. He was talking on an EW live podcast and kind of revealed that he originally disagreed with George Lucas over the ending of the Star Wars trilogy. And he is quoted as saying, "I remember complaining to George about something in Return of the Jedi, and I said it's just so predictable and pat." And he said, "Mark, don't forget these things were made for children. His original intention was to make movies for kids, and have that kind of happier ending and tie everything up." And Mark Hamill even at one point wanted Luke Skywalker to embrace the dark side in the end, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I would not have enjoyed that happening.
No.
What are your thoughts on Mark Hamill's opinions here?
It's interesting. I mean, he goes on to say in that quote, well, I think that's George saying, he's paraphrasing George. He says, "We're bringing our adult sensibilities to it, and that's where we go wrong," And then he also says he realized George was right. He's, going into it after, it's different because you have to go into it. We can't get our minds around that particular feeling from that time, because we've all seen Return of the Jedi. You and I grew up in a time period where that always existed,
Right.
So we didn't grow up in a time where we had only seen 4 and 5 and never 6, and those are theories that could have been that could have been very strong at that point, and it seems like Mark maybe bought into that, without seeing George's intention for all that.
Yeah.
And Mark talks about once he talked with George about it, and George explained where he's coming from and what these movies actually are. It made more sense. So.
Yeah, that's a good point though, because we didn't live in a time where we didn't know what was, the Return of the Jedi always existed for us. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that he thought about Luke turning to the dark side when he now is very much adamant that Luke is this hopeful, good character.
Right.
That wouldn't have any kind of darker elements, I guess. So I
Right.
thought that was interesting. But he ultimately, just like he did with The Last Jedi, came to the conclusion that okay, this is the director's film and decision, and I will support the vision that they're going for. So
Yeah. Right.
yeah. Up next we have, and once again I forgot to mention, our news is brought to you by Far Far Away News, and the next one is looking into the past of The Empire Strikes Back. And Adam, I don't know if you checked out this video yet or not. I think it was
I
up on the
haven't
Star
yet,
Wars
no.
YouTube page. it's kind of, some behind the scenes footage from The Empire Strikes Back. Again, you can check that out on YouTube, Star Wars page. And there was a lot of good stuff in here, behind the scenes stuff, different interviews, and I think there was some stuff in there that I've never seen before.
Okay.
Um,
I'll have to
so
check
it
it
was
out.
nice to just take that look back. I mean, this stuff could have been released in other documentaries or something that I never saw, but
Hmm.
um, to me, it was pretty new stuff. We got some sound bites from George Lucas, director Irvin Kershner, and the cast um, as well. So definitely worth checking out and just feeling a bit nostalgic about The Empire Strikes Back during its 40th anniversary week. So I
Yeah, definitely.
recommend
Yeah, I didn't check that
checking
out,
that
but
out.
like I said, I did listen to 2 different audio commentary tracks, so I might have got some of that anyway.
Yeah, you may have, you
Right.
may very well may have. Um, And our last piece of news when it comes to the movies, this is also Strikes Back focused. There was another Galaxy of Adventures short video released on the YouTube, the Star Wars Kids channel, and it is the Battle of Hoth. Actually, I haven't seen that yet, but I might have to show Sydney this one. And if you have any kids at home trying to get them into Star Wars, the YouTube Star Wars Kids channel is a good place to get started with that. And we have a Battle of Hoth short on there. So, yeah.
Yep.
Jumping to our TV news for this week, we have some really good news, some really positive news about both The Mandalorian and The Clone Wars, and how they compare to other streaming shows like Stranger Things, for example. So, for a very long time, Stranger Things held the crown for being the most streamed digital show. But according to a report from Parrot Analytics, Star Wars The Clone Wars has become the new champion, now holding the crown for being the most streamed digital show, pushing Stranger Things to the number 3 spot. And Adam, do you want to guess which show has the number 2 spot right now?
I'm gonna guess since we're just talking about Star Wars, it might be The Mandalorian.
It is The Mandalorian. So Star Wars currently holds the top 2 spots for streaming shows with The Clone Wars and The Mandalorian. So pretty
It's
pretty
pretty
good news
awesome,
right
especially
there.
for
Yeah.
Mandalorian, because Star Wars, Star Wars, Stranger Things has had like a 4-year head start on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So kind of goes to show, Star Wars fans will watch things over and over and over again, And
Yeah, absolutely.
I think The Mandalorian lends itself well to that. So for
As
me,
I was
Stranger
watching,
Things, I've watched it through twice,
yeah, same
and
here.
I don't know that I would keep going back to binge it over and over again,
Mm,
But
yeah.
I could easily see myself going back for Mandalorian and watching it again, and just starting from scratch and watching episode 1. Even as we get 5 years into this, I could see myself going back, because I've done it with Clone Wars. I'm gonna do it with Rebels, so
Mm-hmm.
Mandalorian will be
Yeah,
the
I
same.
mean, I think I've watched The Mandalorian 3 times so far, and then last night after watching that
I
Disney
almost
Gallery episode,
started, yeah.
I started up The Mandalorian episode 1 again. I was
Yeah.
like, oh man.
Well, you know what? I
Um,
mean, Disney puts that after you finish the episode. Disney puts up, start the Mandalorian
Yeah.
now, and I'm like, well,
Yeah,
maybe I will.
like, okay, I will. Um, our last news article is kind of I'm going to put up a spoiler warning here, and I've been very careful when it comes to these rumors that have been out there to try to stay away from the rumors, or try to at least go with the more reputable sites. But I don't know. I feel like we're getting a little spoiled when it comes to the Mandalorian season 2 with all these reveals that are coming out, and it's really hard to avoid them.
Yeah.
But I do want to put a spoiler warning out there if anybody does not want to be spoiled about the Mandalorian season 2. Now would be the time to skip ahead a couple minutes. But there is, according to Slash Film, there is kind of this idea that Timothy Oliphant, or however you say his name again, is going to be wearing Boba Fett's armor. And the claim is that he filmed scenes wearing Boba Fett's Mandalorian armor, and he is playing a character named Cobb Vanth, introduced in Chuck Wendig's Aftermath book series. And I wanted to mention this one because it was something that was talked about in the chat last week. That idea came up that this could be the character.
I think followers of the Force put that in
we're
the chat,
seeing.
if I remember right.
Yeah. But of course, just like RFB is saying in the chat, we want to be careful until it comes from Star Wars officially. So at this point, this is just a rumor, but we could be seeing that character possibly show up in The Mandalorian season 2.
Yeah. I was excited by this. I remember back when that episode first came out, that was the one character. So I don't know if we actually said it, but Cobb Vanth is the possibility here, which is a character from Chuck Wendig's Aftermath books. There's a few little mentions of him where he shows up on some of these interludes that Chuck Wendig put in this book, and he's this sheriff, more or less, a self proclaimed sheriff, I guess, on Tatooine, and he wears Boba Fett's Mandalorian armor that somehow ended up outside of the Sarlacc pit, and it's all kind of disfigured and scarred up, and it's not as clean as it once was. So I love Royal Farm Boy says Sheriff of Freetown. That's correct. I love the idea of that being the character, just because it's not a character we've seen in live action, and it's an interesting new character that we could get to meet. So if that's true, I love that idea, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, I love it too. I think it's great. I think it's a great way to connect all the canon. I think that's what Star Wars fans have been asking for, is when they're investing in all these canon materials, for it to be connected and for it to mean something. And I think it would be a brilliant move to do this. And I think it would you'd have that connective tissue between bringing in a character from a novel into live action, and it would make sense with the story as well. So
absolutely.
I think anytime you bring in a character from some other medium, it can't just be a cameo for the sake of a cameo. It has to make sense with the story, and have a purpose behind it.
A couple of things I want to point out here, though. First of all, if we found out last year that if Lucasfilm wants to keep a secret, they can keep a secret.
That's true.
So part of me has to wonder, if all this stuff is coming out, what aren't they saying?
Yeah, is some of this stuff coming out just to hype it up and get people excited? I mean, people are going to watch season 2 anyway, but
and I'm sure we're going to get surprises.
The
second thing that I wanted to say is one thing that I heard when I was listening to the audio commentary tracks for Empire Strikes Back this week, where Mark Hamill was talking about how they actually put out some misinformation there. They intentionally put out some misinformation, mainly about the twist where Vader was Luke's father, and they had some of those initial lines be that Obi-Wan killed Luke's father, and then that started running in the press. That got actually stories in England about how Obi-Wan was the main bad guy. Actually, there's that twist.
So like throw people off
the trail, and that's possibilities here. So just because this stuff is coming out doesn't always mean it's true. Like RFB in chat said, wait till Lucasfilm says what's what. Wait until we see it on screen. See it.
I mean, so take everything with a grain of salt until we see season 2. Yeah, and I think it kind of reminds me too of Marvel's strategy when they were, especially I'm thinking of Infinity War, when they had the Hulk in the trailer, and he was kind of charging with all the other heroes and everything, but actually in the film he's in the what's it called, the Veronica suit or whatever, Iron Man suit.
Right. Yeah.
So they kind of put things in there to throw you off sometimes. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that wraps it up for the news this week.
You ready to talk about technology and Mandalorian?
Yes, indeed.
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Like I said before, this was the episode I have been waiting for of Disney Gallery. When we first got those leaked episode titles, technology was the one I wanted to see. You know, I had heard about this stagecraft, and then later we learned it was, they named it the Volume. This was what I was waiting for. This is right up my alley, and I loved this episode so much. Peter Viox in chat says he's going to turn up the volume for this, but
I get it. I get it.
So this episode starts really with kind of the backstory of the Volume, how it came to be. It's Jon Favreau by himself telling us some of the evolutionary processes that he was part of, filming The Jungle Book, filming Lion King, filming some of these other things, and he talks about how they had to build these sets for Jungle Book, and how if they ever wanted to change the camera angle, the problem was that they would have to change everything on set because the parallax doesn't meet up correctly, and so they actually went and defined parallax in this episode, which is, you know, as you change your perspective on something, the position of the object appears to move. So he talked about having to fix that in The Jungle Book. He talked about later with Lion King, they started using video game engines where they could take something and film it as the background is being processed in real time. Which was very interesting that they showed this scary looking lion that John had a camera, and he was moving around with the camera, and he said, you know, that on screen it didn't look quite right, but actually in the viewfinder it looked perfect. This lion appeared to be in that world that they were creating in real time in a video game engine. So then, you know, around the table, they started talking about some of the other evolutions with projection technology, starting all the way back with King Kong. I never knew.
Yeah. No, me neither.
And then Stanley Kubrick's 2001 movies, they used some front projection technology in that as well. I liked that they mentioned that they worked with someone, I forget their name, but they started with ILM, and then they actually went over to work with Epic Games, who created the Unreal Engine, which is a very widely used engine in video games. And then
speaking
of probably
that,
know Epic from Fortnite, which is what they're most recently known for. But they've actually got their name in video games from Unreal, which is what they some of the stuff that they used here. You were going to say something.
I mean, I was just going to say, speaking of Unreal Engine, I don't know if anybody out there has checked out the demo that they had on YouTube running on a
Unreal
PS5.
5, yeah.
Looks incredible. So they're obviously,
yeah, and you know, Unreal is one of those things that gets used a lot, and not just for video games. And I've seen people reimagine things like most recently, I remember Legends of Zelda, the Breath of the Wild, the game for the Switch, got reimagined in Unreal, and you know, it does all these different particle effects, and it just looks real.
Unreal. No, real. Real.
Yeah, it's unreal how real it looks.
Yes, there you go.
So you know, that was one of the main parts of this volume, was this video game rendering technology, and you know, they talked about how in video games you're rendering this stuff in real time, and you know, like as you turn your head in game, it has to be, you know, within milliseconds of actually, you know, seeing that on screen, and doing that with your hands to control you know, what you're doing. So that was one of the main things that they started with here. I always love the evolutionary process of technology, and you know, I think technology best works when it's solving a problem that people have. And that was very apparent in what they were talking about here, is that they had specific problems that they needed to solve, and the volume was the solution, the culmination of this. And it started off not even being what they were envisioning here. It started off with just, you know, interactive real-time lighting, which is something that, again, in video games we're starting to see with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X will be doing this. RTX chips are doing this stuff with more realistic approaches to how light works in a game and now on film.
Yeah, and I mean, lighting is really everything.
It
when
is.
you think about
And,
it, it's
when I do some drawing and I'm taking some art classes and things like that. Lighting and shading is one of those so very important aspects of that. It's something that the human eye picks up on.
yeah,
How light hits an object and how that my phone's going off. How light hits an object and how that creates shadows and lighting and highlights and shading and things of that nature. And that's something you just don't simulate well. It's one of the things that they talked about, when you're putting in shadows in post-production, which you can do. And, I noticed some of that stuff as I was watching Empire the other day, how, shadows were put on to asteroids and stuff.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't look quite right. You notice these things. And that was one of the problems that they wanted to solve with the volume. They started breaking this down into some things like advantages, and so the advantages they put, like we've been talking about, are not having to edit out reflections from green screens, which is something I honestly never thought about. As you're filming these things, especially if you think about the prequels, you have all the green around you, and that does create reflections, especially on reflective surfaces. So you'd have to edit that out so you don't get a green reflection when you're supposed to be looking at a bright white light.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating that they're now embracing reflective surfaces,
Yeah.
like the Mandalorian's armor, and how it kind of, when you have those screens in the volume, it doesn't reflect green screen; it reflects really the surroundings, and I thought that was just awesome.
Yeah. And going off of that, another advantage that they specifically mentioned that we talked about a little bit is natural light and then real-time adjustments to that. So I think back to the explosion scene in the final episode, where they put that explosion on the volume, and then that light reflection happens real time. They don't have to put that stuff in later.
Right.
It just looks natural. It deceives the human eye, which is another thing that I think Taika Waititi mentioned. That when you're seeing this stuff, and then when you're seeing it on film, it deceives you. It looks natural. It looks real, And then Dave Filoni started talking about, well, actually Kathleen Kennedy started with this, where she said you can instantly or near instantly within a day or two fix things that you maybe need to go back in and adjust. You don't have to rebuild sets. You don't have to relocate things. You can just go back in. You can see almost immediately where you need to fix something.
Yeah.
And then just go fix it.
Yeah, and I think that has to be incredibly efficient, because then you're in a situation where you probably don't have to go back later and do reshoots, and you don't have to do as much in post production. You can just kind of do it, load it up, and do it the next day or something.
And then Dave Filoni mentioned you easily changing sets if you do need to do a reshoot or something like that. You don't have to, like I said before, you don't have to go back and rebuild things. He said it just takes like a half an hour to reload everything up and to get it ready to go, and then you're ready to reshoot.
Right.
The next thing they got into was immersion, and this was very interesting to me to see how the actors responded to all this.
Yeah.
Giancarlo Esposito was the first one to talk about this, and you can tell he just loved working with this.
Yeah,
and
the
it's
way
something
he
that I
talked
never
about
really
it,
thought of.
Excited, like
It's something I never really thought about, that he's seeing what he needs to interact with. So for him as an actor, he doesn't have to pretend. He doesn't have to think, this is what I'm looking at. He's seeing it, and that emotional response is built in. Like I said before, he doesn't have to
natural response.
Yeah, he doesn't have to think about that and create it within himself. He just sees it, Carl Weathers also talked about that a little bit, and specifically in that scene in episode 8 where there's going down the lava river. He's seeing all this lava around him. It feels real. He's feeling himself, even though he's not moving. With the way the volume works, where it's moving around him, it feels like he's moving. And it makes me think about going to the parks and riding something like Star Tours, where you're seeing this
Yep.
stuff happen around you, and you're in that motion simulator, and it feels like you're moving, and you have that response to what you're seeing around you. And he's talking about how the light, the tunnel gets bigger as he's getting towards it, but then he looks behind him and it's also getting smaller where he came from, like it should.
Yeah.
I like that Gina Carano actually got worried about being motion sick because
Right.
it actually felt real.
I think I might have that issue too, because
Yeah.
sometimes I get a little motion sick on some of those rides.
Yeah. And then Peter mentioned something else Carl said about how 4 different actors don't have 4 different interpretations. They work together as a team, where
Yeah.
each different actor might be imagining something different if they're working with a green screen or a blue screen. Everyone's seeing the same thing. They're all on the same page.
Yeah, and I think there were a couple, whether it was the cast or the directors, a couple people I think mentioned just how liberating it was. You would
Yeah,
think it would be
yeah.
more confining, but it was actually more liberating. And I can't imagine how much it helped the actors with their performances when they didn't have to imagine, while looking at a green screen, that they could actually see their surroundings.
Yeah. The last section here was the section that just kind of gave you the chills, I guess. But this was called George's Garage. And
Yeah.
Bryce Dallas Howard talks about how, she heard George speak one day about how, one day we're going to be able to make this stuff in our garage, with the advances in technology and things like that. Once again, thinking back to the Legacy episode, I love how George is just so much a part of this.
Me too.
Even he's not there directing or producing. They show him on set again. They talk about how much of an impact his work has had. Kathleen Kennedy talks about this is what George wanted to build but wasn't able to at the time, and they mentioned how he was again 10 years ahead of his time with the technology he wanted to work with. Just this is kind of going back to the idea of legacy. George left his imprint on this 10 years ago, and these are things that Jon Favreau and Kathleen Kennedy are picking up on and taking to the next step.
Yeah, I loved hearing Bryce Dallas Howard talking about George's Garage, and it definitely just gave me kind of chills and everything, and then some definite big feels about this whole thing and how it's kind of connected to George in a way, and it being kind of what he envisioned, and his brain was always ahead of the technology of the time.
Yeah, and George was saying, how he, the advantages of green screen is that they could just put up the screens and then put any type of background they want to. They could do that later, and they said now you can do it on set, which is even better.
Which is even better. Yeah.
Seeing those star fields light up, and just actually looking in a star field, and then there's one scene where John was standing he was going into hyperspace, and it was like, I want to do that. I want to be there.
Yeah.
I want to step into the volume and go into hyperspace. That just looks so cool,
Right.
But this was an amazing episode for me, and
it was.
like I said, I was waiting for this. It didn't disappoint. I watched it twice now, and I'm gonna watch it again. When I first heard about Stagecraft, I was blown away by it, and seeing it in action and seeing it working and seeing it with all the set pieces around it, and seeing actually how the parallax works. I can't wait to watch that episode again, and now I can't wait to go back and watch The Mandalorian again, to try to pick this stuff out, Even
that's what I wanted. It made me want to instantly go back and watch and see if I could even notice or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
but
I love this episode.
The other thing I was amazed by is how it just creates, and we talked about the lighting, but that episode 5 that they mentioned with the gunslinger and Toro Calican and all that stuff, and how they're sitting there in this dawn. I think it's dawn. Time of day, where they're actually creating like these silhouettes because of the lighting that comes off the volume. This realistic setting. I mean, it looks beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, So I guess my final question about all this is, we talked about there's so many advantages to this technology and
Yeah.
and so many things. Do you think there are any disadvantages to this technology at all?
Um, I was
Are there
thinking
any
about that, and I
downsides?
remember we talked about this a little bit during the Skywalker Saga documentary, the Skywalker
Mm-hmm.
Legacy documentary, about how John Boyega and I think someone else mentioned how going to, I forget where they went for the desert scenes.
Yeah, I think it
It's been
was
a few.
Jordan
Yeah,
maybe or.
Jordan's right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, about how actually being there, feels different,
Yeah.
and I think that still holds true.
Mm-hmm.
The one disadvantage definitely you have is wide shots. I was thinking
Right.
about that. I don't know how you would. I'm sure there's ways to replicate it because
Mm-hmm.
I think back to the speeder bike scene, where they did replicate some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think it might be a little more challenging, but I'm sure that there's ways to fix that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then
I mean, I think for TV it's perfect. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. I would like to see it used in film one day to see how that
Yeah,
carries
I'm sure
over.
it could be. I mean, maybe they'll, still shoot on location somewhat, but also use the volume when they're on a smaller set or something. And
Yeah. So I was thinking about that, about how actually being on location might feel different. But then you hear Giancarlo Esposito and Carl Weathers, these
hmm
actors that have done these things and been on location, talk about how working with this thing was so liberating and how it felt, how they could have those natural interactions with things, and it's like maybe this does work that way.
hmm Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the advantages far vastly outweigh any
Yeah,
disadvantages. I
right.
think it's excellent. For me, there's just this one thing, and while I was watching The Mandalorian, I couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was, but I felt like some of it, not all of it, just certain scenes, I felt like it was somewhat contained
Hmm.
and small. I felt
Yeah,
like just
I know what you
something,
mean.
it felt a little
Yeah,
small or a little too contained. And now I understand probably why that is. And that would be the only downside for me. And
yeah, I
um,
understand what you mean by that.
yeah,
um
but other than that, I think it's
and this is also the first
brilliant.
iteration of this technology ever.
You're right.
uh there's going to be more iterations of this. There's going to be advances in the technology, and I think maybe eventually we might not have those same feelings,
Right.
as this
Yeah.
continues to get used and perfected and changed by other people that use it and other people that bring their ideas into it. So
hmm Yeah, I mean, I think one final thing I want to say about this is, that I think they're doing this the right way. Um, George Lucas was always about advancing the technology and using what he could to create things, to do things in a new way and to innovate. And I think that they're doing that with The Mandalorian, and I think that's very important to John Favreau. And I think he kind of models himself a little bit after George Lucas. And um, I think, earlier in the chat here, Radio Rebellion mentioned that Favreau and Lucas are so similar when it comes to talking about technology. And I love that. And I think, um, that the roots of what they're doing, I think, come from George. So
yeah,
I really
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now we are ready to celebrate the 40th anniversary of my favorite movie of all time.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
So The Empire Strikes Back just celebrated its 40th anniversary on May 21st. It was released in 1980, and it was made on a budget of $18 million, which doesn't seem like a lot nowadays when it comes to film budgets. And it's made a total of 547 million at the box office. It's often considered the best Star Wars, the best Star Wars film and one of the greatest films ever made. It's the highest rated Star Wars film on Rotten Tomatoes with a critic score of 94% and an audience score of 97%. And as I mentioned, Adam, not only is this my favorite Star Wars film, but it's also my favorite film of all time. So, what do you think it is that makes this movie such a beloved film for so many people?
Um, there's a lot of things. But one of the, I think I want to mention right here that it didn't start out that way. You
Right.
know, some of the reception initially was really mixed, and I think it grew
Hmm.
over time. Um, for me, what made it beloved was Yoda. All the scenes with Yoda,
Hmm.
the wisdom and the mythology and the mysticism that comes with learning more about the Force and expanding the knowledge of that. Um, I think for me that's probably the main thing that makes it
Yeah,
so beloved to me.
definitely. Yeah. For me, I think the reason I love Empire so much is because I think it contains all the elements that you want in a movie.
Yeah.
And all the elements that potentially, in my opinion, make a perfect movie, which I feel this is. And it has your comedy, it has action, it has a great love story, it has the challenges of a middle chapter of a trilogy. It has this big twist at the end. That
Yeah.
was the biggest twist probably in cinema history. Um,
Yeah, one of probably the most quoted line in cinema history.
yeah.
Also,
So I think it just has all those elements that make a very rare perfect film. Um, I love all of Star Wars, but there's in every Star Wars movie, there's something that I would probably change about it or take out or put in or whatever. But Empire Strikes Back, there's nothing that I don't like about it. There's nothing that I would be like, oh, I could do without that. Um, so yeah, I mean that's why it's my favorite, and you know that is my thoughts on The Empire Strikes Back. But thinking about this film, what are some of your favorite moments from it specifically?
oh man, um, I just name them off, I guess. Scruffy looking nerf herder. I can't even say it.
Hmm.
Laugh it up, fuzzball. I mean, just all these quotes. You can just go on
Yeah,
forever. Do or do not. There is no try. Um, I love you. I know. I mean, there's
yeah,
there's so many, and then not even to mention I am your father and all that stuff.
right.
There's just so many memorable moments, and
Hmm.
I don't even know where to start. Like I said, you just have to kind of go through the movie and just name them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like you said, when I think of The Empire Strikes Back, I what comes into my mind first is Yoda training Luke, and like you said, I think it just deepens the mythology of Star Wars and the Force. I feel like it just takes the series to another level, and a lot of times that's why I love sometimes the middle chapter of a trilogy more than any other film in some trilogies. Like for example, um, thinking about like the Two Towers. I absolutely love the Two
Yeah,
Towers.
yeah.
Thinking about trying to think about another one that just kind of takes the series to a new heights and to a new level, and I think The Empire Strikes Back does that. Um,
For me, and I'm
but
blanking on the name. The middle chapter of the Hunger Games,
Catching Fire,
Catching Fire, was one that did
yeah,
that for
it's my
me.
favorite. In The Dark Knight, even in the
Yeah,
Batman trilogy,
yeah.
I think certain middle chapters can really take it to new heights, really challenge the characters, and um, in certain ways. But
Right.
I love the whole Bespin scene. I love Cloud City and all that. I love even John Williams' score because it's different from kind of other elements of the Star Wars score when they get to Bespin. And of course, the confrontation between Luke and Vader stands out. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there are so many great moments.
Yeah, Radio Rebellion in chat puts his favorite moments. It says so many, but to narrow it down has to be everything on Dagobah and learning
Yeah.
so much about the Force, the light and dark sides. And then
Hmm.
to piggyback on that, Peter says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." Yoda teaching Luke on Dagobah, teaching us all.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that's always what stands out for me is all the stuff with Yoda, and what he can teach, what he teaches Luke, what he teaches us, even as fans, and deepening that mythology. Um, so, what would you say has been the overall or cultural impact of The Empire Strikes Back?
Well, like we mentioned before, it's one of those movies that in pop culture has just been quoted and um, referenced so many different times, misquoted a lot of times.
Hmm.
Probably one of the most misquoted lines with "Luke, I am your father"
Luke, I am
ever.
your father, which
Um,
which he didn't actually say,
yeah, yeah,
like in that way. Yeah.
yeah, right. Um,
Hmm.
so I have to just go with that, just being the pop culture icon that it is,
Yeah. Yeah, it's referenced so many times. You're right. I was even thinking about I think it was Civil War where Tom Holland Spider-Man, he's like, "So did you ever see that old movie The Empire
Oh,
Strikes
yeah,
Back?" And
yeah,
he was kind of like reenacting the Walker scene where they had to,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
use the tow cables and everything. But yeah, I mean it's referenced so many times. I think that, you know, like you said at first, maybe it had some mixed reactions. I don't think The Last Jedi is going to age as well as Empire did, but I always
I was
wondered that
wondering.
if
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I don't
for the
know.
sequel trilogy, will it, will what,
I
later on
think
will
any
people look at it differently?
movie, once you give it some separation in time, I think it's going to grow a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's going to grow to the degree that Empire has grown,
right. Probably not, but
but I do
um
think it'll be more widely accepted in 10 years than it is now, and a lot of that is because as people who have grown up with these movies, and I'm going to mention this a little
mhm,
bit later, but as people have grown up with this movie, you're going to hear more, and we're seeing that now with the prequels, where that was um the movies that brought them into Star Wars and
mhm.
got them to love this franchise. They're going to start mentioning how much they love those movies, and I think in that amount of time we're going to see the same with The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker and all that stuff.
Yeah, for a different generation, and I think about the personal impact Empire had on me, and um, it changed my life. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think A New Hope got everything started. It set the table for the universe, but The Empire Strikes Back just, again, like I said, took it to a whole nother level. Um, I think for me, it just gave me the awe and wonder that film can produce, and it just, it because of this film, I fell in love with movies in general and with Star Wars. Um, so yeah, and I think it's had such a huge overall and cultural impact. I think, like Mark Hamill says in the some of the behind the scenes stuff that's on YouTube that we talked about in the news segment, Mark Hamill talked about how when he was referencing The Empire Strikes Back, he said, "Well, it's kind of, I'm paraphrasing here, but it all comes down to this movie. If this movie is delivers, then you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's, and I think that's really true,
yeah.
um, and it did. So
And Megan in chat says that after she thought about it, she has to go with do or do not. There is no try. She put that on her college
mhm.
graduation cap a few years back. It's cool.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite quote of all
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there, Megan. And my next question is: has this film stood the test of time? And if so, how do you think it has?
It has. It definitely has. And I think a lot of that, it's interesting. I think some of that has to do with the fact that it's been revisited in an editing process for a while, and some
Mhm.
of those updates that they can make have been made, so it doesn't maybe feel like it is a 1980 movie anymore.
Right.
So I think that helps.
Mhm.
As we advance in technology, and we've talked about things like the volume, some of the technology that we used in decades past is more apparent, and I think that having the ability to go back and update that has helped. The other thing that has helped is one of the points that I pulled out of listening to some of the audio commentary. I think it was Irving Kershner mentioned this, and I love how George always calls him Kirsch in
For sure.
in those tracks.
Yeah.
But Kirsch mentioned how, especially on Bespin, the costuming that they use isn't this like spacey silver metallic costume. It's very simple. It's stuff that we
Yeah.
would see normally, and
Mhm.
so imagining the sci-fi world in kind of real world timeless time in a real world timeless way has helped it age like it has.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm with you. I think it absolutely has stood the test of time. I'm going to make a bold statement. I'm going to say, to me, The Empire Strikes Back looks even better as a film than, like, let's say, Attack of the Clones does. I think
Yeah, I
Attack of
don't
the
think that's
Clones.
so bold. Yeah.
I think Attack of the Clones feels more dated than The Empire Strikes Back than The Empire Strikes Back does, and I think that comes down for me to practical shooting. Using practical things and shooting on location, all those types of film techniques that were used, because the technology wasn't perfected yet when like George created the prequels. Again, his mind was kind of ahead
Yeah.
of where the technology was, so
Yeah.
it's going to look a little outdated now because of that sometimes overuse of CGI. So I think has stood the test of time because of that in a big way.
Yeah.
Um, but also
Uh,
just because it has these universal themes and the hero's journey and all that, you know, mythology and everything that stands the test of time as well.
yeah. Followers of the Force and 2Med2 both put something along those lines in chat. David said the fact that you can continue to learn from this film and Star Wars as a whole is what makes it great. And then
Hmm.
2Med2 says he watched the movie 3 times the other night after the Beyond the Blast Doors live chat, and then he even learned new things, came to new realizations after watching it.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to watching it again tonight. And I'm
Yeah,
sure
we haven't
Adam,
mentioned
you'll
this
talk.
yet.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that we are going to have a Empire Strikes Back watch party tonight at 9
Yeah.
p.m. Eastern time. That Adam's going to give you some more information on in a little bit. Um, so my next question is: do you think any future Star Wars film can live up to the bar that was set by The Empire Strikes Back, and why or why not?
So for me, this is a weird question because it's not actually my favorite Star Wars
Right, because
movie. I usually put
let's
it
say
number 2.
let's say Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. Can it
Okay,
live up
okay.
to?
Because I was gonna say, I
Yeah,
mean, for me personally, yeah, that's already happened. So that's, but I still think yes, and I go back to what I said before. Is as we enter new time periods with Star Wars movies and new eras and new trilogies and things like that. Uh, we're gonna start hearing more from people that grew up with these movies down the road, and
hmm
how those movies live up to what the bar that we set, and for them it might surpass it, and that's great. That's what brings new people into this. That's we're not stuck in um something that happened 40 years ago, even though that's kind of our heritage here.
hmm
We learn new things, we bring new things into the story. uh you know and for those people, those movies resonate more, and it surpasses that bar for them, and we're going to start hearing
Yep,
more and more about that. Like I said, that we're hearing now with the prequels, where how
the
that's
prequels,
some
right?
people's favorite trilogy, and how the Phantom Menace is some people's favorite movie.
Hmm.
And we're going to be seeing that more and more as we go along. So um and then as far as like critically, I always have to take that with a grain of salt.
Sure.
uh because even some of those standards change over time, and
hmm
they change with reviewers, and some of that's so subjective.
I think
um
a lot of it can sometimes, unfortunately, even be very like political. And
yeah, yeah,
if
for
a
sure.
film, sometimes if a film has a social agenda, it might be more well received by critics. That's just my perception, and certainly I could be wrong about that. But you know,
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think it'll anything will ever live up to the bar, or at least maybe you've
you
set?
make a really good point about a different generation of film fans. Feeling that way. I guess what I'm thinking about is, do you think for you, any film could
Yeah,
surpass those two?
yeah,
You know, and I was thinking also about myself. You know,
right.
for me, I think it's going to be really hard for any film to live up. I think so far there's been a couple that have come close. You know, for me,
Yeah, right.
like Rogue One, Force Awakens, Last Jedi.
I
Those are all
kept
pretty
thinking about
close
Force
for me, but
Awakens, and like I
hmm
know that it gets kind of knocked down because it's a little bit of a copy of New Hope,
right.
which I understand.
hmm
Um, but man, I haven't had a Star Wars feeling like that in a long time, and I haven't had one
Yeah,
since. So
yeah, yeah. So yeah, we'll see. I'm looking forward to a film that might one day challenge Empire or Return of the Jedi for me. So we'll see. Um, and Adam, did you have any other thoughts or anything else you want to say about The Empire Strikes Back?
you already mentioned that this is kind of the stepping stone. It all hinged the entire saga in a way hinged
hmm
on this movie. And if it didn't do well, that would have been the end at that point.
Yeah,
Um, it's more important just than being just a good movie. It's what kept this going. It's what gave us an episode 6, and then later a new trilogy, and then books and everything else. So everything that I consume now really probably hinges on this movie.
yeah, yeah. I think for me, I'm very grateful to George Lucas and everybody that created this film, and I'm just thankful to have this film in my life because it really did change my life. And a lot of things that I do today, probably sitting here and having this conversation with you, is because of that movie. And my love for film in general. So yeah, just looking back and reflecting um, about The Empire Strikes Back is celebrating it too on its 40th anniversary.
Indeed.
So, all right.
You ready to wrap up episode 30?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Thank you everyone for tuning in, listening to us live, watching us live on YouTube. We really appreciate everybody that's been in the chat. I mentioned some of them off the top, but later on, followers of the Force joined us. 2Med2 joined us. Megan Rickards joined us. Thanks everyone for joining in. I'm pretty sure I got everybody in chat this week. So, but thanks for tuning in. If you didn't tune in this week, remember we do this live every week, every Saturday on YouTube. So you can always follow or subscribe to the channel there and get notifications when we go live. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher if you're maybe just watching live or listening to the show. We are on most major podcatchers, and if you happen to listen on one like iTunes that lets you leave a review, please do that. That helps us a lot in getting out to more people so that more people learn about what we're doing here. Check out the website from a certain point of view.com. We've had a few blog articles this week. One of those that I'll mention right now is some heads up on how we're doing a watch party tonight for Empire Strikes Back. That's going to happen at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. What you'll need for that is a couple things. You'll need an active Disney Plus subscription. That's the only thing you'll have to pay for here. That's how we can kind of legally do this. So you'll need a Disney Plus subscription, and then the rest of it's free. You'll just have to get a Chrome extension called D Plus Party. Install that. When it's time, you just click a link, turn on that extension, and it'll sync up your Empire Strikes Back watching with where everyone else is at, and then on the right hand side there'll be a little chat window where you can chat with everyone live. So Josh and I have tested this once. We hope it works tonight.
Yeah, that was pretty neat when we tested it out. It was pretty simple. I mean, just takes a couple minutes to set up, and then once you get in there, it's cool how it syncs everybody up, and you got the chat on the right side, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so on the blog there's an article about how you can get that ready, and I'll be tweeting that out a few more times today just so everyone can see it. That'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, so we hope you guys can join in, and we hope you enjoy it. It should be pretty fun. socials, make sure you're following us on Twitter. Like I said, where I'll be tweeting that stuff out for the live show, for the live watch party. That is Certain POV Pod. Facebook is From a Certain Point of View. The Discord server link is in the show notes, and it's on the website. Like I said, we are about to finish up Alphabet Squadron in our book club, which takes place in Discord, which means we'll be starting up another book here soon. I think we're going to, for a full book, I think we're actually going to wait until Shadowfall, the second entry in Alphabet Squadron, comes out. But in between, I think we're going to read maybe a comic selection, maybe a couple of those. So if you'd like to join in, just hop in the Discord server. Our email is certainpovpod@gmail.com. And we are on Anchor. That's where we have our show hosted. You can send us a 60-second voicemail there. If you have a question for us, if you want to get your opinion on something that we said this week or any week, sending a voicemail is a great way to do that. And finally, Josh, where else are you on the internet? Where can the good people find you?
You can find me at Jedi Jar Jar 1722 on Twitter, and occasionally writing articles for Star Wars Newsnet.
Excellent. I'm on Twitter at thegauze85. I write articles for Far Far Away News, and there'll be a new one coming out this week, I believe. So make sure you follow Far Far Away News and follow me at thegauze85, and that's where I do most of my stuff nowadays, is Twitter.
Right, outstanding, and thank you everyone again for joining us today. Whether you were joining us live or listening later, we really appreciate your support, and we wouldn't be here doing this without you guys. So thank you once again. I hope to see you and chat with you in the Empire Strikes Back watch party later this evening. And until we meet again, remember that everything we told you today was true.
From a certain point of view. Awesome. Yeah, I'm good with PB&J. I like PB&J. I actually hadn't had PB&J for a long time, and then my wife bought for my daughter those Uncrustable sandwiches.
Oh yeah, we have those.
And I've
too.
been kind of going to town on Uncrustables this week.
They're pretty good.
They are pretty good.
they're not bad at all.
I know. So I've been getting my hankering on for PB&J.
Yeah, the only limitation is you get it out of the freezer and you gotta wait like 30 minutes.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I've eaten a couple frozen ones this week.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you gonna do? When you're hungry, you're hungry.
Yeah. Thanks, RFB. It was a fun one for us. I'm glad
thank
you liked it too.
It was fun. So.
Oh, that sounds awesome, too. He has 8 different types of homemade jelly from his family's farm.
Wow, that's impressive. I keep saying most impressive today.
I would love to try one of each.
Yeah.
Cool. My wife has a family farm, and that's where we get our meat that we use. So we had a homegrown steak the other day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Man.
I'll have to make a trade for some jellies.
Yeah. Do they take orders or anything like that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But we'll have to. I can hook you up.
Hook me up sometime.
I can hook you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I have to get ready to go. Like I said before, we're picking up a new puppy today, and that's going to happen in about 45 minutes. So.
What kind of?
It's a toy poodle, like Abby was. So we're replacing Abby with that. So.
Yeah.
Not replacing Abby, I guess, but.
No. Do you have a name picked out yet, or no?
I do. Do you want to know it?
Yeah.
So, our current puppy, is about 7 months old. His name is Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Our new puppy is named Luke.
Nice. Ben and Luke. I love it. Gotta keep it in the Star Wars family.
Yep. So, as of another hour, we'll have Ben and Luke.
Can't wait to see them in person.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Did you figure out if you're available at all whether it be tomorrow or Monday for anything? I know you mentioned family on Monday,
Um,
maybe, but
Yeah, we are having family on Monday. I mean, if it depends on what time you have something going on. If you have something
Okay.
like, I'm sure we could stop over after family leaves. I don't know when they'll leave, but we could stop
Okay.
over in the evening Monday. I know that Monday worked better for some people.
Yeah,
so.
it seemed like it. So okay.
So yeah, if it's Monday, I'm sure we could probably stop over. So.
All right, cool. I'll text the group or something. So
Right, cool.
all right. Well, I'm gonna go try to figure this pool thing out, and
Yeah.
you have fun
Have
on
fun.
your
Yeah.
puppy journey. All right, man.
I'm getting a potential spam phone call.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, I will talk to you soon.
All
And
right,
thanks
later.
everybody out there in the chat, and hopefully we'll see you tonight. Talk to you tonight. Actually, we won't see you, but we'll talk to you on the watch party.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks
See you,
for
buddy.
tuning in, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and end the live stream here. But like I said, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we'll talk to you later tonight.